Our most successful video to date is a conversation all about the uses of gold in role-playing games. And after going through multiple sections of the comments, after reading a lot of the things that you all had to say about gold, I've come to the conclusion that gold still kind of sucks as a fantasy currency. Hello, I'm Kyle Ott. I'm not even going to do any of the other stuff. I want to talk about what we're doing today. You can do all of the random YouTube garbage at the end. I really want to get rolling on this. I'm so excited. So, one, I went through all of the comments. I am sincerely grateful. It was awesome to see the response. Basically, when I posted that video, I wanted to make a discussion. I think that we could be a lot more interesting in the types of things that we do for our fantasy role-playing games, and apparently, whether you agreed or disagreed with me, a lot of you had a lot to say about the issue. So, I wanted to make a response video because A, I really like all the comments, I really appreciated them, even the ones that were disagreeing with me, and B, I wanted to address what I believe is arguably the best criticism and critique of the video that I posted, which is a lot of my rewards and a lot of the things I put forward as different types of currency feel more like quest rewards. And I have to say, again, having watched the video, gone through some of your comments, and listened to some of the critiques, I think I am actually inclined to agree. So I wanted to make this video, and I wanted to talk about new types of currency, real currency this time, that you can use in your fantasy role-playing games. So before we do that, I want to address some of the common comments. First, let's talk about bags of holding. If you're one of those people in the comments that was like, wow, I can't wait for this dude to hear all about bags of holding. One, I know what a bag of holding is, dog. I've been playing games for a long time. Two, not every game is Dungeons & Dragons, nor should every game be Dungeons & Dragons, and not everybody just gets, I don't know, a Japanese JRPG-style inventory system shoehorned into their fantasy game. Three, yeah, you can use it, and it does fix a lot of my problems, but it also is kind of a boring cop-out answer. I don't know. It just feels like a boring cop-out answer to me. It does fix my issues with weight. It does also fix my issues with storage, and of course with hauling currency around. But again, I think it's a really boring answer to what is actually, I think, a really interesting question, and at least a lot of you are inclined to agree with me if my YouTube statistics are any indication. So, no, we will not be talking about bags of holding. Yes, I know what a bag of holding is. I don't know. I don't want to hear bag of holding ever again. The only time I want to hear bag of holding is if you stick one bag of holding inside another bag of holding to make a trans-dimensional grenade because you decide that today is the day you get to meet God. That's all that I care about. No more bag of holding. Moving on. Another one that I wanted to talk about, denominations of coin. I don't think I did a great job in clarifying another issue that I had with the use of coin in general, is that I think coins of any kind, whether we're talking copper, silver, electrum, platinum, gold, is that, again, I think it just increases the bookkeeping work for both the player and the GM. It does certainly answer some of my other criticisms. For example, it does answer the inflationary issues, and it can be used, again, for a more, shall we say, historically truthful version of a role-playing game. Makes way more sense to use copper and silver for everyday expenses than throwing gold around in a tavern. If you are going to go the route of using multiple different kinds of coins, I would just get rid of copper in general, do what Morkborg does, and use silver. Again, a bunch of you pointed out I called the coin use in Morkborg gold when Morkborg does use silver. Again, my apologies there. Oh, one more thing while we're on the topic of other forms of currency. Some of you brought up gemstones, and I do think gemstones, if you want some sort of hard currency, but you don't want to get crazy with it, gemstones are really good. You could just treat them like $50, $100, and $200 bills if you really wanted to. I will not be using gemstones. Last but certainly not least, before we get into the types of currency that I have come up with, and the types of currency that I'm going to encourage you to use to make your games, at least I think, a little bit more interesting, we are not going to be doing any of the other stuff that I covered. Although it did not get its own section, some of you, I think, actually missed the section where I pointed out that you can use promissory notes. They were used during the Crusades. They were used by several Muslim caliphates before they were brought back by the Crusading Knights. You absolutely can use this. I think this is a totally valid and actually historically accurate practice that you can use. It's actually really interesting, I think, and actually might give your players a chance to, build a relationship with the local banker in their town. I am also not going to use favors. Some of you said, oh, you can't use favors as currency, but actually you can. We have two big examples of this. One, during the Great Depression, here in the good old US of A, it was entirely common for people to actually use favors as a type of currency, especially in small farming communities or in rural communities like the ones near where I live in Appalachia. It's a really big deal. Also, shout out to the commenter that actually found the Flash game that I was talking about using favors. I will play this at some point on the channel. I am so grateful to you, commenter. You are awesome. I love you. Thank you. I thought I was going crazy. I did not know or remember the name of this game. It's called A Small Favor if anybody wants to play it. I don't remember how good it is, truthfully. I could be, looking at this through incredibly rose-tinted glasses, but shout out to the commenter for reminding me. So we're no favors. We are also not going to be using special powers or new magical abilities as a type of currency. Again, if you are playing a more arcane influenced role-playing game, I do think this does work as a type of currency, but we will not be doing it because I covered it in the last one. And last but certainly not least, we will not be talking about magic items either. So with all of that out of the way, let's talk about the different types of currency. But before we do that, I have to kind of hone in on what exactly are we looking for when we are creating a currency, because that influences what I have come up with. So what are the criteria that we need for a good form of currency? Well, there are a couple different things, and I actually thought about how we in the real world use currency, because let's be honest, in most fantasy role-playing games, the existence of magic kind of makes it a little bit like the real world. We have technology, they have magic, so I thought about, hey, what do we need and what do we have or prioritize in our own currency, and how can we maybe adapt that to fantasy role-playing games? So the first thing we need to think about is there needs to be a form of currency that is portable. It is important for us to have currency that we can take with us on our shopping sprees, to the grocery store, to the gas station, to Indie Press Revolution, where you can get copies of Desks and Dorks games. Wow, look at that. I did manage to get a shillin' after all. Wow, so good. So if you were hoping for there to be water buffalo as currency, that's not going to happen. The second big characteristic is we need currency to be universal, and I don't just mean that it is going to be able to be used for everything, both big and small purchases, right? The same currency that you use to purchase a meal with at a tavern can also be used to purchase a sword from a blacksmith, but also maybe, be used to purchase a fortress, but also it needs to be universal across the borders so that we can get over the fairly annoying bookkeeping part of fantasy conversion rates. And last but certainly not least, we need to address the biggest elephant in the room, which is that magic kind of trashes gold. One of the commenters actually pointed this out, and I actually scoured all 765 comments of the video to see if I could find it and post it here, but essentially he said something along the lines of magic being an immutable force within a game world completely and totally demolishes the idea of a coin-based currency. And they're kind of right. I agree with that. If we have the power and ability to shoot lightning out of our eyes and fire out of our faces, why on God's green earth would we assume that a simple gold currency or any coin-based currency whatsoever would be able to stand up to it? Or, as another commenter pointed out, that wizards and sorcerers and warlocks wouldn't try some kind of weird fantasy garbage to get around the basic rules of currency. It's really important that we address the power of magic in there, otherwise we get Shadow Wizard money ganged, and again, we don't get a chance to actually use the currency that we have. So, any currency that I create must be portable, it must be universal, and it must address magic. Now you may have noticed this desert that I have put right here because our first type of currency actually requires you to play in a desert world, or at least a very arid one for this particular type of campaign that I have envisioned. It's a world that, maybe has gone through a series of apocalyptic changes, and perhaps those apocalyptic changes have rendered a lot of it inhospitable, and so characters are forced to cross large stretches of sand at a time, and in order to do so both safely and effectively, they have to rely on one of the oldest forms of currency in the known world, something that is portable, something that can be used for pretty much everything in this desert world, and something that does address magic. But to talk about that, we have to talk about salt. That's right, friends. We are going to be using salt in our game world, or in our case, a magical powder that is both salt, like the table salt that we use to season our food, as well as having magical properties in our game world. Now, before you start turning up your nose and saying that this makes absolutely no sense, we have to talk about somebody else, and how cool is it that I get to bring this individual up one more time. We get to talk all about my boy Mansa Musa once again. Now, you may remember Mansa Musa from our previous video where he was able to destabilize economies with the massive amounts of gold. Again, the gold is pictured here. But what you might not know about Mansa Musa is that he used to have a golden staff. Now, this staff had to be sold and melted down because in order to help his caravan get across the desert, he needed to actually melt and sell the gold in order to afford the salt needed to actually cross the desert. In fact, salt was so precious and so expensive, it's actually where we get the ideas of somebody being worth their salt, for example, and also this is another potential origin for the words or the phrase worth its weight in gold, because that is allegedly what Mansa Musa paid for the salt, was for every block of salt, he paid its weight in gold. So again, it has some historical precedent, which is cool. It was actually really used as currency. It is anti-magic, because if you actually listen to folklore or read folklore, depending on the type of folklore that you read and type of stories you indulge in, salt can be used both as anti-magic or anti-spirit. Shout out to my supernatural fans. And in real life, it's antimicrobial, which is why we have so many legends about salt being actually, magical. It's kind of cool. But how are we going to use it as a currency in this interesting game world? Well, I've decided that instead of like a purse or a coin pouch, characters in this world will carry pendants. These pendants will have grains of salt, and depending on how expensive or the type of transaction they are going to go through, the salt can be of a lower or a higher quality, but they'll usually carry them in pendants around their neck or in larger charms that they wear as necklaces or maybe even purses. It's entirely possible that you would have a canister of salt that you would wear like a satchel in our game world. And for larger transactions, I of course am going to borrow again from our good friends in the past, and homes would have their own separate salt storage area so that you can again go in and take the salt as you need it, or you could use mass quantities of it for larger transactions. But aside from the economic ramifications of salt and its use within the game world, let's talk about how we would use it as a gameplay mechanic. The first thing I want to talk about is that salt scales or scales of any kind would be fairly common, especially even handheld ones for merchants or even members of the party to weigh out their salt so that they may use it for transactions, kind of like how ancient Babylonians or Assyrians would have scales of some kind as well. Now, the other thing that you can do is you can spend the salt to make spells more powerful. Again, this is a type of magic salt, in addition to being a wonderful seasoning for food and something that you can use to preserve goods. It is supposed to have a powerful spellcasting component. Again, depending on the system that you want to run this in, you may do this by either upping the damage, increasing the save DC, or my personal favorite is coming up with a list of different spell effects that a player can choose to add to a spell depending on how much salt they spend. If you're a D&D person, this could be like meta magic, for example. You could use it to empower or widen a spell. If you're, say, somebody like me who really enjoys Shadow of the Demon Lord, this could be a desert apocalypse. You could use that salt to potentially cause horrible wounds or summon even worse things from the Dark Planes. And again, that salt can be used to keep those entities in check. The sky is really the limit with what you can do with this salt, and that's kind of the reason that I really love it as a type of arcane thing. But now I have to give some credit where credit is due. One of the commenters in the last video actually pointed out the idea that, man, oh man, what if we used the gods for currency? And in order to do that, we have to cast our minds and imaginations into a world inspired by ancient Mesopotamia. So at this time, it was entirely common in many cultures, whether we're talking about the pre-Hellenistic Greece to the people in the Middle East, modern-day Iraq and Iran. We have to talk about their way and their view of the divine, because what's interesting is they would have had, in many cases, multiple gods, in some cases hundreds of gods, for many different things, and those gods were a constant source of both inspiration and, in some cases, fear in everyday aspects of their lives. And for us to do this, we need to lean into that concept. So, in order to actually use this, our players, much like the sand, will have pendants, totems, talismans, or in some cases, even portable shrines that they use to either A, contain smaller deities, lesser deities, for example, that control tiny things like the taste of a berry or perhaps the fluttering of a cicada's wings, to massive, larger, and more ornate shrines and idols that they will be using to carry far more powerful divine servants. In some cases, these are not cages, but they act as, let's say, receptacles for divine power. A smaller deity, like our deity of the cicada's wings, for example, probably needs that shell of that idol or that pendant in order to survive, whereas a larger, more powerful deity that would be used in one of these massive portable shrines, this might just be trying to contain a small fraction of that deity's might. So What can we use these for? Well, small gods can be used for trade, or in some cases, they can just perform the task for you. For example, 12 nights at an inn might cost you a small pendant that is related to the god of the smell of a strawberry. But in other cases, you might just lean on that god for their services. A harvest god, for example, that could always produce fresh bread is probably a great boon to a party of adventurers that's moving overland. However, this is the big issue, is not only can you trade and potentially use these gods as a form of currency, exchanging them for goods and services, or in some cases simply using them for goods and services, you could also even destroy them to get a more powerful version of that blessing. What does it look like when I break my pendant, my talisman of the harvest god in order to get, I don't know, bread golems or something? Yep, you can be officially ready for battle. A true member of the upper crust. You have all the flour in the world. Okay, I'm done. I promise I'm actually done. But again, larger, more powerful gods could effectively buy you a king's ransom. You could trade, for example, a shrine to the god of lightning in order to get yourself a castle or an estate, and destroying that could conjure a thunderstorm or any number of really powerful, really interesting things. As a GM, I love this system because it means I get to roleplay more. I get to be the little tiny gods. You get a little god you can treat kind of like a Tamagotchi, which is kind of sick. Imagine that. You put like the god of death into like a big giant portable shrine that you carry on your backpack, and then you just talk to it sometimes. I think that's really neat, and I think that would be really fun in terms of a role-playing thing. And again, it really does encourage the players to be a little bit more interesting, and I think more invested in the system when they are literally wheeling and dealing with divine power as a form of currency. I think this is super cool. If you are looking for some good inspiration for this kind of campaign, I cannot recommend the story, The God of Arepo, enough. It is a fantastic take on exactly the kind of deities that I am talking about, and might in fact serve to help inspire your own type of divine currency. And last but certainly not least, I have to throw one more commenter a shout out, because they brought up the idea of what if we just used magic the way that some people use NFTs. And I'm not going to explain that to you. I'm just going to leave you with that. You know what? This is your challenge, Desks and Dorks comment section. Go make me a game called Cryptocurrency for Serfs, where you have to explain to a medieval peasant why a picture of a turnip is worth exactly that much as a regular turnip, if not more. I want to see this happen. I don't know what the magic system for that looks like, and I don't even care. I just want you to explain stonks to a medieval peasant. And I just think that is the best form of currency. And that brings us to the end of the video. I wanted to give myself a sort of short section, so I have put video footage on this so that you all can sort of listen to me talk. But again, sincerely, thank you so much to everybody that helped us cross the 2,000 subscriber threshold. It does mean an absolute ton to me. I really appreciate all of it. If you want to help us out, the best way to do so, purchase the games in the links in the description below. That's like the actual best way to help me keep the lights on. But liking, sharing, subscribing, all that stuff actually does help tremendously. It's really cool that I get to do this as part of my job, and I'm going to continue to make these for as long as you guys continue to like them. So I did want to share a couple of the funnier comments that I didn't get a chance to do anything else. Any fantasy world with conjuring magic has an absolutely ruined economy, which is kind of where I got the inspiration from. So shout out to Andrew Whooper 7603 for that comment. I did have somebody accuse me of being central bank propaganda, which I thought was kind of funny, and I'm not entirely positive if he understands that this is about fantasy role-playing games and that I am not telling everyone the horrors of the gold standard. And of course, a bunch of people reference Spice and Wolf, which I actually thought I would make its own section because it is a fantastic anime and it does a really cool job representing economic models within a medieval setting, but in the end, I decided to cut it for time. But again, sincerely, thank you all so much. Really appreciate you all. This has been super cool. We had like 500 subscribers like 6 months ago, so like this is dope. But in any case, Kyle out for Desks and Dorks. You guys have been absolutely amazing. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.